Lovely. Okay, so our usual start, just rubbing your hands together and tapping over your face. Over your head and neck. Down to one shoulder and your arm. On the other side. Off your chest. Belly. And your legs. Good. Sit back and you've all done this enough to have an idea of certainly the initial exercises that we're going to be doing. So put all that to one side for a few moments and just focus on this awareness aspect, though, bringing your attention into your body, noticing how you feel, how easy that might be or how difficult to establish this connection, this rapport between body and mind. As a way of taking stock. So you've got your posture, your weight sinking down, your breathing. These are all things that we can begin to focus our attention on. Not with the intent to change anything at the moment, although you may find that happens. But just to get that little bit of space in your mind as much as anything else. Have a sort of catch up with yourself. Have a sense of how you're doing. Bringing your feet in and just trying to maintain that awareness and that sense of listening to your body, and with that quieter or spacious feeling as you go through the different movements. Two reasons really. One is because it's actually one of the great benefits of the art, and I think, as always, we're living still in uncertain times, and that has a certain amount of stress associated with it. We want to just sort of allow that to release through our bodies, our minds. And also because that stillness, that space, is actually one of the things that actually helps us to understand the exercises. And particularly when we get to more complicated exercises, we want to be able to sort of approach them from a calmer point of view rather than get panicked by, oh, what's going on here. So, our usual starting, turning slowly and gently, noticing where there's a sort of resonance in your body with the movement. Can you feel anything happening through part of your back, behind your shoulder blades, your chest? And using that awareness to help to broaden the movement. So although it's your head turning, there's more of the body involved than just your neck. And with that, a growing awareness of the fluidity of the movement, the energy associated with the movement. And then shoulders. It's useful to make note in your mind of areas that feel a bit stiff or a bit tight. We don't want to dwell on them because that becomes uncomfortable. But we don't want to ignore them either. We want to work with them and around them and hopefully get some degree of release from them. And then going forwards. And your hands down by your sides, circling, so you just sliding your hands around a pillow or a ball on either side. Notice that my elbows are slightly curved. I'm not straining to hold my arms up at all. Fingers are hanging down. And then winding around. And back the other way. Tilting forwards. Feeling your legs filling up with your weight. But also at the same time, as well as this sort of compression, this feeling, a sense that your weight is flowing downwards, so that really as you go forwards, first part of your body that should feel, if you like, think of it as this way, the pressure of your weight should be the soles of your feet. If you want to make that a little bit more obvious for a couple of rounds, raise your heels. Don't hold your heels up for too long because your calves will get tight. And it should feel a very smooth movement, almost like somebody were sort of gently massaging the soles of your feet, pressing, releasing, pressing, releasing. Because of course, soles of your feet are against the floor, so that's where we do the pressure against. And then turning slightly, so now it's more on one side than another. These are very subtle distinctions that we make. Training your mind to notice these subtleties. And then in the other direction. And a circle. and then go back the other way. Come back to the center. The upper body has a certain position here, and when we go to move our feet, all that's going to happen is a very slight sideways shift. You don't want to lean over, and as you start to move your foot, you don't want to strain or struggle. So it's really important to get this position, to maintain this position, and then just raising your heel. If I show you from the side what I mean, yeah, what I want to be able to do is this. You can see my heel coming up. I don't want to do this or this or move around. I want to get out of the habit of having to move the upper body when I take a step, because when you're standing, that can really throw you off. And then you raise, pull the toes up, step out, put the heel down, press gently into the ground. These are all elements of walking, the ordinary walking, I mean, that we want to be able to practice, because they often get lost in just the standard walking down to the shops type process. So it's a good opportunity to reflect on these things. And then on the other side. Letting your hips sink into the chair. Step in. Good. And then bring your feet back. Again, give yourself a few moments in this position. About a third of your weight forwards, so your upper body well supported by your legs and your hips and the chair and the ground, of course. Let your hands drop down and then easing forwards and pushing back. So that support from the lower part of your body helps your upper body to just release a little bit, to soften. Then we can start to get that feeling in our back and our spine. So the spine will just gently floating forwards and backwards. That's obviously going to be quite a small movement, but it will build like a wave coming into a beach. It will build. So that as it moves through your body, and remember, we noticed before when we were moving the arms and the head, what was happening in upper back, chest, and so on. All those movements, all those areas of the body are still engaged. So by the time the momentum reaches your fingers, there's enough energy there to really let your arms move without having to strain in your shoulders. And when that happens, the flow comes. We don't have to make the arms flow, and the harder we try to make them flow, the more stiff they will become. But look, taken in this direction, what we end up with is just a natural rhythm, a natural flow building in our body. And then change into rolling the ball. One more time. And then pigeon spreads its wings. Just cast your mind back to where you notice areas that feel a bit stiff and tight. How are they doing? Hopefully not getting tighter. The general feeling all the way through your body is very gently massaged from the inside out. And then pressing forwards. One more time. Hands twisted. Turning your hands out. Winding back in. And then bring your hands in and push up. Rest it. The hips go down. The upper body lengthens. So again, that nice steady pulsing rhythm. That's one of the constants, and it's one of the things that really helps to move our arms. If you imagine the expansion, the contraction in your body creates a wave through the air that moves your arms for you, then we change now to the wild goose. understanding that, feeling that connection with the rhythm can actually help you to do this exercise without straining in your arms. And when we come to some of the later movements, like Wind Blows the Willows, it really helps to keep the flow of those movements if we focus our attention on things like the expansion and the contraction. These are the building blocks of all of the movements. And then Heart in the Clouds. Now go back to rooting down, and we're going to do these three as a sequence. So just as a suggestion, when you do the rooting down, get the feeling for what's happening in your belly, in your lower back. So that seems to me to be the main area where we get the expansion building. But then when we change to the Wild Goose, we expand in the belly, but then also we're more aware of an expansion in the solar plexus, the lower part of the chest. And then again, as we go into Heart in the Clouds, expansion in the belly, chest, and then up towards the upper part of the chest and the arms. So we get a real sense for how different movements begin to highlight that internalized movement, those building blocks of the movement from within the body. No movement is isolated. Do this round one more time. When we change to Dragon Plucks the Stars from the Sky, it's similar in a way to Heart in the Clouds, doing the expansion travel right up through the body, but just on one side. And then when we've got on one side, we switch to the opposite side, taking our time. One more time on each side. Good. And then pushing in two directions. Here we feel the back lengthening. Whole body's expanding, but that's the sort of feeling in the back and the main focus of the feeling. But here, it's like somebody's gently massaging your back and alternately sort of smoothing it out lengthways and then sideways. And if you can feel that in your back, see if you can then get a similar kind of feeling in the front of your body. And see what happens now when you add the turn in. Extend one foot, scooping the seam, looking at the sky. You may find yourself going a little bit further back in the chair here. Just aware the line through the back of your leg and your back as you go forwards, and then when you come back, almost like a thread of elastic stretched up through the front of your body. Now let that extended thread of elastic pull you forwards. This time fist your hands, grasping the tiger's ears. So every move you make prepares your body, loads your body for the next move. Here as we go back, we feel the extension in the front of the body, that contracts. We feel the extension through the back and so on and so forth. So the movement just rolls on very nicely in that way. But for those of you particularly interested in the Tai Chi forms, this is very much a feature of the forms that each movement we make is complete in itself, but also leads to the next movement. Do this one more time. And on the other side. And then changing to grasping the tiger's ears. One more time. So what this means, what we start to notice after a little while, is that actually our arms move. We don't have to make them move, but they will move. So for instance, when we do fisherman cast the net, I mean, how would you do this if your arms weren't moving? Suppose if somebody had hold of my arm and I went forwards, it would actually be quite uncomfortable. I said, can you let go of my arm? And if they let go of my arm, this would happen. Likewise, if I went back, that makes fisherman cast the net the most fundamental of exercises in some ways. If I hold my hands here and I turn, my hands move with me. Again, if somebody grabbed hold of that arm and I turn, I say, let go of my arm because it's hurting, because you're pulling my arm out of line. If my body expands, if I hold my arms here and I deliberately, exaggeratedly, sort of like do this, see what my arms are doing? They're moving. If somebody had hold of them and I did this, it was like, hold on, you're stopping moving. Let my arms go, and they'd fly up. So we don't actually have to make our arms move. So this is useful to realise and important to realise, because it shows us where we need to be putting our attention, where we need to be putting our effort into movements like wind blows the willows. The first thing we want to do with wind blows the willows is this. We flap our arms around and we twist our body around, then we wonder why it doesn't feel right. And we easily overlook the weight moving, the centre of the body turning, that natural expansion and contraction. When you breathe in, your body has to expand. If it doesn't, then breathing in is going to be a struggle. So if, for instance, I came up to you, I put my arms around you and I squeezed really tightly, you'd say, hold on, I can't breathe, because I'll be stopping your body from expanding. So all of these things come perfectly naturally. All we then need to do right at the end of the accumulation of those processes is just tweak the arms a little bit. It's like fine-tuning the movement. The problem is, although that comes at the end of the process, it can be quite tricky and it can be quite dominant. So what we want to be able to do is get to a point where those fundamentals, the weight moving, blah, 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 come quite naturally to us. It's how we move, and therefore our thoughts, if you like, are only occupied with minor things. In the case of wind blows the willows, of course, expanding, contracting, expanding, contracting, weight moving forwards, weight moving back, weight moving forwards, weight moving back, body turning, so my weight moves more into this leg and back, body turning and back. I was able to do that movement without actually referring to the arms once. And so that's important. It's not that I don't think the arms are important, they express the movement of the rest of the body. So let's try building that up. Just go back to the simple weight transfer. And as you go forwards, turn slightly as though you're pushing into something with this shoulder. And that will take your weight quite naturally into this leg more. Try that on the other side. So it's now this shoulder pushing into something. Imagine what it would be like if you were sort of walking along and trying to push through a door or something like that. So now go to fisherman cast the net. And you'll feel a little bit of expansion and contraction here. Your body expands, pushing the arms forwards, contracts. And if we then add the turn, this happens. So my arms aren't moving very much. And the thing that's making them move, the things that are making them move, to transfer the weight, the turn of the center, are very much there. And they're going about as far as they can. So the thing I want to add in there is that my body expands and contracts, and that pushes my arms up a little bit further. It also pushes your hips down. And this brings us to a really crucial point, that there's always an opposite movement. If you feel the expansion starting in your belly, it will expand in all directions, upwards, sideways, and downwards. So it maintains that connection to the ground, your root. The wind blows the willows. I'll do one more of these. And so that's the correct way to build up the movement. But perhaps more importantly than that, it's also the correct way to move. If you look at the figures from the NHS that classify when people fall, when they're more likely to fall, for instance, then you'll find that quite often we fall when we turn quickly. It's like you're standing at the sink doing the washing up, there's a ring at the doorbell, oh, it must be the parcel arriving. You turn quickly, it throws you off, twist your body up, and over you go. We can fall, or indeed hurt ourselves, because it's not just about falling. If we overextend the arm, you know, if I sit here and I want something over there, and I just do this, I can pull my shoulder or whatever. So if we're moving correctly with the shoulders, with the arms, with the upper part of the body, we can hurt ourselves, we can fall over, and so on and so forth. But if we can move with that sense of connection, we will maintain that connection with the ground. Now, we often go from wind blows the willows into dragonfly skims the water. Earlier, I was saying to you about the stepping. When you raise the heel and then raise the foot, you do so without this straining. Imagine what it would be like if you're standing, yeah, and every time you wanted to move your foot, you had to do this. Sorry about that. I wasn't planning to disappear quite so dramatically. But it's because I'm leaning over. But if I can do this, keep the body upright, then I'm more stable. So this is important. And when we combine it with the turning, the transfer of the weight, and so on and so forth, we've got a number of things that are quite difficult here. But let's have a go. Go very gently. Don't feel you have to lift the foot up. You can just lift the heel. And remember, there's 3 stages to the raise of the foot. You raise the heel. You raise the toes and the heel. So you just pull the toes up. You raise the heel, pull the toes up. And then with dragonfly skims the water, if it's comfortable, and be careful with this, you do this and you rotate the hips. So it's like you're kicking a ball with the inside of your foot. So let's build that up, starting with wind blows the willows again. Hands at your sides, go forwards. You're going into the leg that you're turning away from and back. And then on the other side and back. So now you go forwards, you raise the heel, you raise the toes. The opposite foot. So the foot that you're turning towards, you go back. Go through the other side and back. This is dragonfly skims the water. So as your foot comes up, as your arms extend, as your body turns, notice that your hips sink more into the chair. And then, if it's comfortable for you, we'll only do this a couple of times. Rotate the hip as well. Be very careful. If you get any pain in your knee, your ankle, or your hip, don't do this. It will come in time. There's plenty of time to build this up. We'll do one more. And rest. So that was the delightfully named, I think, Dragonfly Skims the Water. It's a good movement to do. The news items are telling us that dragonflies are doing really well in this country at the moment. I think it's just a lovely piece of news to hear. We hear so much doom and gloom that to hear that something's doing well is great. Apropos of nothing at all to do with Tai Chi, of course, but it's nice to think about that. So that was Dragonfly Skims the Water. I put a film on YouTube of Wind Blows the Willows, Dragonfly Skims the Water, both standing and seated. So if you want to look at that exercise a bit more closely, have a look at the YouTube channel. If you can't find it, give me a shout, drop me an email, and I'll give you a link. But now, rubbing your hands together again and tapping over your face. And then over your head and neck. Shoulder. Your arm. The other side. Upper part of your chest. Belly. And your legs. Get strong on your legs. Get the blood flowing through your legs. So when we stand, we want to try and take all those different elements, our awareness of those different elements, with us as we stand. So standing up. As always, you can use chair for support, whatever, but I'm going to move mine out of the way. Before I fall over it. Move the water bottle out of the way. So don't think of the seated exercises as somehow being inferior to the standing exercises. They're a really useful way of focusing our attention on important elements. And we want those important elements to become natural to us, so they're really worth practicing. The example I sometimes give to people, and we could use this about rooting down, the alignment, the expansion and the contraction, is the shoes. Yeah. You don't need to keep looking down and checking your shoes. Oh yes, they're still done up. You don't walk along the road and take a step and say, yeah, my shoe's still done up. The shoes, you don't. You walk along the road and you may be chatting to somebody. Suddenly you realise, you get this feeling. It's like, oh, my shoelace has come undone. And you carry on talking to them. And you just do your shoe up and then you walk on again. And it's because you've worn shoes all your life. I can just about remember being about that high and thinking that trying to do my shoelaces up was the ultimate in traumatic torture, that it was a really horrible thing to do. Now, I can do it most of the time. So if you do something often enough, so if you practice the transfer of your weight, aligning your body, stepping, all of these basic elements often enough, they'll become how you move, and you won't need to keep thinking about them. So we're going to start off. We'll do that little sequence of 3, rooting down, wild goose, and heart in the clouds. So pushing up, feeling expansion and contraction, building up through your body gradually with each movement. So it's nice to do the little movements in the sequence, and it's nice to let your mind go with the sequence, just to get that sense of the flow, continuity in the movement. It's not the end of the world if you get it out of sequence, of course. But the more you do this and the more you're aware of what's happening within your body, the less likely that is to happen, because the build-up is quite natural. If you've ever sat on the beach and watched the waves coming in, you'll know that they gradually creep up the shore when the tide is coming in. Bit by bit, they come up the shore a little bit and then recede. And then they come up again and maybe go a little bit further and recede. And then they come up, they go over the ground they've already covered, go just a little bit further again. And that's the sort of feeling that you're looking for within your body, that you want to become the focus for the, or the center of the movement. So that rather than seeing the movements from the outside in, we reverse that. And this is an important stage of development in Tai Chi. Interestingly, when that happens, we find an improvement in what we might think of as the external movement. So we're not sacrificing the external movement. Now, do that one more time. Now we're going to do the wild goose with a little turn, just a small turn in your hips. And when you get this movement, you can let your hands drop all the way down this time. Just keep turning as you push up. So from the back, you see this, sinking down, facing the front. As you push up, turn a little bit to the side. Feel your body expanding and contracting. And expanding and contracting because your legs are expanding and contracting. So, shake your legs out. When we have one foot forwards, we let our weight sink down. When we go into the back leg, that's better. When we go into the back leg, our weight sinks down. And what happens to the leg? It's compressed, it contracts. And when it contracts, it's going to do this. Except we don't want to do this, because we'll fall over. What we want to do is to translate that expansion into a forwards movement. And then the front leg gets compressed, and contracts, and expands. So what we do is we use the mind to tell the body what to do. And it's very simple. We want it to go forwards and backwards, not up and down. There'll be a little bit of up and down, don't worry about that. And this is what we call intent in Tai Chi. So it's like if you ride a bike or if you drive a car, then you push the pedals down or you start the engine and you start whatever we do. Yeah, and then the vehicle moves. And then we steer somehow. We use the steering wheel or the handlebars and the body to steer the vehicle. This movement in the legs is like pushing down the pedals, starting the engine. I've been teaching Tai Chi for quite a while now, and I would say that for the first probably 5 or 10 years of learning Tai Chi, particularly again if you're learning the Tai Chi form, when we find that when we feel there's a kind of problem with the hands, we're not sure what the hands do, it's the wrong question to ask. It's almost certainly, I would say 95% of the time, is something to do with what's happening in the legs and the transfer of the weight. Later, so after 10 years or whatever, not quite as much, but a good 50% of the time it still remains true. So these are very important exercises. So now, going forward, and also working in this way, once again, really keeps us connected to the ground. The legs expanding and contracting, and in the mind, our intent, as we would call it in Tai Chi, is to go forwards and backwards. So we've really cultivated that overlap between body and mind that exists quite naturally, but we've turned it into something far more useful. We cultivate these things. And we started that process right at the beginning of the session. We can shake out. So we'll do fisherman cast a net and wind blows the willows. Think about this. I said earlier that it's the expansion and contraction in the body that sort of adds to the movement of the arms. So when we do fisherman cast a net, once again my arms are moving with me and a certain amount of momentum builds up. But there's also an expansion through the body. Remember, when we did this, the expansion and contraction of the legs stimulated an expansion and a contraction in the upper part of the body. So the back leg expands, that builds a wave. The momentum of the weight moving moves the arms a little bit, and the expansion, the wave, does more. So then, when we move on from that and we go into wind blows the willows, it's the same thing. The back leg expands, the upper body starts to expand, and then the upper body turns. Nice and soft in the shoulders, and it works backwards as well. So nice and soft in the shoulders. All these processes coming together to give us these two movements. So 1 foot forwards, fisherman cast the net. And then we change by just turning. It doesn't matter which way you turn. At the moment you can turn either way, or wind blows the willows. sinking, remember, into the leg will prepare you for the next movement. If you don't sink into the leg, it will be like stopping pushing the pedals down on your bicycle or the accelerator in the car. The movement will die. And if you continue to try to move your arms after that, you'll begin to start straining. Good. Now change over. Fisherman cast a net. One more time. So this time when you settle into your back foot, turn. Good, and then bring your feet back. So find your chair. So after all that, just taking time to come back to that quieter, stiller feeling with embrace tiger, return to mount. Push your arms out. Wrap around as though you're holding the ball against your chest. Drawing in, hips sinking, shoulders dropping, the body contracting downwards. And just at the moment here, a very slight momentary pause before we start again. And then rest. Lovely. Thank you very much, everybody. Hope you enjoyed that. It was useful to you. Remember, as I say, if you want to find stuff that's up there on YouTube, you can't find it, drop me an email and I'll point you in the right direction.
Thanks, Mike. See you.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Probably tomorrow.
So take care and I'll see you all soon, hopefully.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye all. Bye, Sarah.
Bye.